Hello and welcome to another interesting session of our series, which is named Reflections, Stories to Recharge and Rejuvenate. And today we have our guest speaker with us, Peter Clark. Very happy to have you with us, Peter. Peter has been practicing and teaching Raj Yoga meditation for nearly 40 years, 4 decades. And he divides his time between coordinating the BK Center activities in Brisbane and also working part-time. Peter is also a musician, and I've heard some of his songs, and they're really beautiful with his guitar with him. And his commitment to the greater good allows space and freedom for others to grow. And his values include dignity of spirit, authenticity, and appreciation. And today, the title of our story is Clearing the Way Forward. And Peter is going to share about a time when he was knocked over by a car and years later completely run over by one. Whoa. And both times, luckily, he recovered. And that somehow made him think that there has to be some reason for that to happen. And what was the thinking that came inside, what changed based on that, and what happened next. Let's hear it from Peter directly. So a very warm welcome, Peter, and it's over to you.
Thank you, Lata. Thank you so much for that warm introduction. It's lovely to be here, and I don't know, it is a very reflective thing to do, to talk about some, I don't know, significant incidents from one's life. In some ways, these things, in particular, these things that I've chosen, could seem a bit horrific. And I know what it's like. If one gets a little wound on one's body, it's it can be not such a big deal. But then if you see the same little wound on someone else's body, it makes you cringe, and the shivers go up your spine. And somehow when it's happening to you, it doesn't seem as bad, I think, as when you observe it in someone else, especially someone whom you're close to or whatever. But yes, I had chosen these couple of incidents which they were years apart. And one was soon after my first visit to India, which was in the mid-80s. And the other one was only about 9 years ago now. And so there was a couple of decades there in between. And yet, in some ways, they were very similar sorts of incidents, except, the first one, I was on a push bike. And I was out riding with other people, other friends. And someone who wasn't looking where he was going decided to cut a corner, and he was looking up the other direction on the road to see who was coming down the road. And anyway, he went straight through me, but fortunately for me, I went over the top. And I had a short, very short blackout moment. But I guess my account of the incident was that of riding along, looking up, seeing the vehicle, and literally within a split second, it had hit me. And my final thought was a sort of a thought of acceptance. Somehow it's as if on a subconscious level I knew that this was something that had to occur, and and yet it wasn't analysed because it all just happened literally in such a, less than a second. So the next thing I knew, I was flat on my back on the road, and and literally there was the guy who'd been driving the car seemed to be there straight away. Maybe I was blacked out in the meantime, and he was absolutely panicking. He was beside himself and yelling at me to not move, and that sort of thing. And within a short space of time, my friends had caught up or doubled back, whatever, and were there with me. And we were all meditators at that time. We were all out together riding, and it was such a nice experience to have friends who were all meditators, all calm, and all able to sort of reflect on situations and not get caught up in the emotion of it. And I think somehow that did affect the fellow who had been driving the car, and I couldn't tell you much more than that because, at that time I was doing a sort of a bodily check at that time, because people began asking me questions. Does this hurt? What's happened? Can you feel your leg? Can you feel your head? And so on. But it was an incident which I recovered from really quickly, very quickly. I went into the outpatients, and they, gave me local anaesthetics and worked on things and sent me home. And I was in bed for a few days, and I think within 1 week I was walking around. I dislocated a shoulder, which had clicked back in, and that was there, that's still there, as a sort of a wound to this day. But very much a type of acceptance there of the whole thing. And then the second accident, many years later, I was on a motor scooter, and I wasn't really a motorbike rider or anything. I was always a driver, a car driver, and yet I'd taken up riding this motor scooter to try and save some money. And one day I was out, and someone in front of me moved to the left just before a corner, and I thought, oh, they're going to turn the corner. But actually that wasn't what was on their mind. They were intending on doing a U-turn without indicating. And so suddenly I found myself going into the side of that vehicle and then underneath. And it was a strange sort of an incident, again, because it was quite different to the other one. There was no real blackout. In fact, I was going underneath, One always thinks, don't go underneath, always go over the top. And then I went, the wheel, not the wheel, and then there was a wheel. And so then suddenly I was in enormous pain, and again it was like there were people around me. It seemed like a whole bunch of people had stopped, and people trying to discuss among themselves, saying, take his helmet off, no, don't take his helmet off, do this, no, lying flat, leave him where he is, blah blah, all that sort of stuff. And it was that type of thing. But there was a lot more pain involved in that one, because actually I'd had 7 ribs broken by the wheel of the car. But I was to learn really that in hospital that it was an extremely lucky incident, because as I was told, if they'd run over my stomach, that would have been terrible. And if it was any further north, it would have meant, my head, my neck, which would have not been any good whatsoever either. So actually ribs, that was by far the best preference, And you can't plan for that, but things just happen. Something like this just happens. So anyway, I was taken care of, and it was a far bigger incident, and this one took months to recover from. And yet, they were amazed in hospital that I was leaving the hospital so soon, I had no internal organ damage, and all I had was broken ribs, and the other shoulder had been dislocated. And so actually, both my arms were just almost like floppy. Couldn't do anything, could barely hold a cup of tea, couldn't even really do that properly. So, but things came back together, and one way or the other, it all finished up okay. Now, I think over the course of years and what have you, it's sort of made sense to me that things are going to happen, and there's a great level of acceptance that needs to happen there. We need to, I have, really felt for myself that I needed to acknowledge the simple notion that whatever happens to in one's life, it was necessary for some reason, There's some sort of clearing of past debt. And in particular, after the second accident, I really felt that. It was so clear to me, so deep there. It felt like, a bubble had burst and there was a mess, that needed to be cleaned up in a way. But that actually some pain from the past, some doing of my own, had been cleared. I felt like I was back to where I had been at some point in the past before I had created whatever I had created. That this incident occurring to me was the settlement of something from my own doing. And it didn't really matter to me what. I mean, honestly, I could look at my this life and, I was always attracted to cars, to driving fast. Always. And, I had such a big interest in motor racing when I was young. My first experiences in learning to drive involved, I guess, stolen vehicles, and they were really borrowed vehicles. They went back, but and reckless behaviour on the road, and all of that was when I was young. And I think about what I actually got away with. I got away with a lot, and yet the karma of it, I suppose, or the account of the whole thing to do with driving certainly hadn't started there. It was very deep, and there was a certain element of recklessness in my behaviour. I was a risk taker, and in some ways, and yet I think looking back, I always felt like there was some sort of there would need to be a need for me to take some risk. It wouldn't be just for the heck of it. But I think when it came to driving, there was some particular attraction to the notion of going fast and so on. So all of that was playing out in a way, and all of that was coming back to me. And incidentally, for the last 20 years, I've had a driving job. And so driving is a big thing, for me. I've had to, in a way, drive to, I suppose, to somehow deal with and level out everything about myself. It's become pardon the pun, but it's become the vehicle to allow things to level out, to settle, to go back to neutral, and so on. So I think I'll stop there, and that sort of outlines a lot, I guess, to do with where I'm coming from. Oh, you're on mute there, Lata.
Thank you for sharing that story. I mean, I'm sure it was not that easy, going through, surely physically quite painful. But the thing that you mentioned about acceptance, and it felt that this was to happen and something's getting cleared. So how did it really feel inside? Like a burden getting lifted, or feeling of freedom? Would you like to mention
Yeah,
a bit on that?
sure. Just as you were asking the question, it occurred to me that, in sport they talk about good pain and bad pain, There's some pain when one is going for a certain level of physical fitness. There's some pain involved in that, and the pain, is associated to, as I understand it, the tearing and redeveloping of muscles. Because in order to grow larger, they actually tear and then they reform, but stronger and bigger. So I think in a way we could liken my story to this. As I was going through physical pain, and even sort of, I guess, certain emotional things to do with my thinking at the time that came into play, like things related to the driver, the driver of the other vehicle. The insurance companies that I had to deal with, my lawyer, people I knew, friends, family, etc. Lots of different things were being expressed, communicated, and so on. I had a bit of on one hand, one feels a lot, one gets a lot of love and attention from friends and relatives. And on the other hand, one then has to get on the phone and battle with the insurance company that represents the offending party, I mean, I had a lawyer to do that for my own bodily health, but I had to do it by myself for my motor scooter. So I had a variation of experiences there. So during all of that, I felt like there was a learning. There were frustrations involved in that. Especially to have someone from an insurance company tell me that I could go to Adelaide and pick up another scooter the same as mine for this much money, and me thinking, right, so I should fly to Adelaide and then ride it back to Brisbane. Is that it? I mean, it just sounded ridiculous, but an insurance representative knows what he's doing, and they've got all the tricks of the trade. So there were frustrations involved in that, and then there was a lot of stuff that played out on a mental level and also on a physical level. So, but I felt somehow that it was a clearing, and the pain seemed justified, in an odd sort of a way, right? I got this motor scooter so that I could save some money. Well, I'd only had it for 1 year, and this happened. So, but then what happened was all this money came from the insurance company. So suddenly I had money to buy a car instead. The money came just in a different way to what I was expecting.
Yeah. And do you think, since you were practicing meditation, especially when the second accident occurred, so how did meditation practice help you with regards to
Wow.
accepting that and
Well,
feeling stronger, even though it was.
look, I mean, it's helped me so much at the time and on an ongoing level, Lata. At the time is the big test. It's not like it's not like you're just totally removed from pain and all of that. The point is you have to make an effort at that time to remember all those notions that we learn in meditation, how to do it. All of that needs to be applied quickly and intensely on the spot. And yet it was very beneficial. I felt that. I really felt that, you know. Um, I had a friend show up at that time. The only person I knew. There was no one with me who I knew at the scene of that accident. But what happened was a friend of mine rang just as someone on the road was trying to make a phone call for me using my phone, and she didn't know what to do. She couldn't find my who to contact on my phone and all of this. Suddenly the phone rang and she answered it, thankful as anything, and it was someone I knew, Lee, by the name of Lee. And he rang me, which was really unusual. He'd usually text me. But on this one incident, he rang me because he wanted to get through straight away and have a conversation. So she sort of blurted it out, and he suddenly showed up. It seemed like suddenly, but it must have been, I don't know, a few minutes later. It wasn't that far from where I lived. And he'd gone to where I lived. So he showed up, and it was sort of funny because when he showed up, I felt like this voice came from behind me saying, "Hi, Pete," and it was an odd sort of a thing because it was humorous. It had that, it had this feeling like, "Oh, wow, Lee, are you and I in heaven?" Or now in the subtle form, are we both dead, sort of thing. There was that sort of feeling because he was someone who has quite precarious health, and one never knows what's going to happen there. And somehow a part of me knew that I wasn't dead, and yet a part of me was playing with that notion on hearing his voice, and it suddenly became humorous. It was funny. Anyway, over the years, definitely, I think in the months to follow, it really played out my meditation ability because it just sped up my healing. I mean, people at work, people who I know, the doctors, my therapists, you name it, everyone was just astounded, really at how much I'd improved, how rapidly I'd improved. And now, if I tell people I had this accident and describe the accident, they sort of are amazed because they think, well, no, but surely you're damaged for life, when that happens. And I think, well, no, that's the benefit of meditation.
Yeah, I think that's a great proof to say, like, no matter what, we can still keep going strong and happy.
Yeah.
I think that's one of the benefits. So
absolutely.
That's wonderful, Peter. And if I could request you that, since you have mentioned about meditation, if you could lead us into meditation experience by a commentary, so our online viewers can also.
Okay, that'd be lovely. So if you just allow yourself to be comfortable where you sit, not expecting too much, but relative comfort. allow yourself to be in a state of relaxation. And this may not come at first, but you can let it build over a few minutes. Breathe in deeply and out, and in once more. And feel that regular breath remove you from all the other concerns of the day. And begin to establish a strong sense of inner peace. Create now in your mind an image for yourself. This image is like a star, and it shines from the center of your forehead. Now become that star. Feel that you are that star. This visual sense is starting to build a beautiful feeling of the inner self. And this inner self is what we know as the soul or spirit, the conscious being, a being of spiritual energy. A spiritual light. The soul, I, am self-luminous, and I am an eternal being. An eternal being of light. And deep within, at the core of my being, there is inner peace, total inner peace. Somewhat forgotten, by the surroundings and the clutter of this world and this life that we have. But when I meditate, I begin to tap in to this inner peace once more. I am the soul. The peaceful soul. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Peter, for leading us into that beautiful experience of who we are, the spiritual, beautiful life. Thank you once again.
Pleasure.
And
thank you for having me.
for our viewers who would like to know more about the Brahma Kumaris, please do visit our website, which is www.brahmakumaris.org.au. There are different programs and events all put up on the website too. So please feel free to have a look and visit any of our local centers as well. So thank you for joining, and we'll see you again in a couple of weeks with another interesting story. Till then, take care, keep meditating. Om Shanti.